Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. My guest today is Joshua Houston, podcaster, content creator, and father of two. Joshua went viral with a post about the need to create a space for other male voices other than what we typically see out there today. There's just too many bros out there talking about what they think it means to be a man, and not enough regular dudes talking about how to be a good partner and father. And that is a lot of what our conversation is about today. Echo chambers, seeing things from other perspectives, and the balance between trying to be a provider and be present with your family. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. I really enjoyed this conversation. Let me know what you think. successfulworkingparents@gmail.com. My name is Anthony Franzese. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast, where we talk to working parents about how they're able to balance it all and still thrive. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. The title is still pending. My guest today, he is a nursing recruiter for hospitals in the Austin area, host of the Joshua Houston podcast, father of two, ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Houston. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate the successful part of that working parents.
Yeah, everybody always has a different feeling about if they should, if they're allowed to be called that or not. But you definitely are, and we're going to talk about that. Before we get into that, we'd love to have you give a quick background on yourself and your career.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I recruit nurses specifically in the Austin area, helping out hospitals there get nurses. That's a hard-working group of people.
Yeah.
Great people there. So I enjoy getting to work with them. It's hard work, as you may know, especially since COVID, there's been a big shortage. So it's hard work, but it's good, important work. You always want a good nurse when you when you end up at the hospital.
Sure.
So I do that. And I mean, my career, I've jumped around a lot, done a lot of different things, and kind of landed on recruiting, not necessarily what I went to college for, but like a lot of us don't land where we went to college. And so, yeah, it's a busy career. It's a tough one to do, but it's also fulfilling and important work.
I know I always envied people that knew what they wanted to do and what career they wanted to have, before they go into college. My wife's like that, but I'm still not really sure. So,
I know, right? I know. I feel the same way.
So you also launched a new podcast recently. I know you host another podcast as well, but you launched a new podcast. You launched a new podcast recently. You had sort of been pontificating online about the need to create some alternative spaces and some alternative communities. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on what inspired you to feel this need, or where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so that happened back in November of last year. It was on Threads specifically. And yeah, like you said, I was just kind of musing about there needing to be space for men specifically in the podcasting world that wasn't just this very kind of narrow, I call it a bro version,
Yeah.
where you've got to you have to be a personal trainer and like drink a bunch of protein shakes and stuff like that to be a real man.
Yeah.
And I love like what you're doing, because that is this, like, just us regular dudes working hard, trying to be good dads, trying to be good husbands. And I think we need more of this type of space, more of these type of conversations where we see like there's not just a narrow way to be a good man, to be a good father, to be a good husband. We all bring our own personalities and stories to the table, and there's no wrong way like that to be a man. It's not this way or that way. It's just have character, be a good dad, be a good husband, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, don't get me wrong. I do drink an occasional protein shake from time to time, but I feel like, yeah, there's just been this kind of radicalization of what it means to be a man and what it means to be like a partner and a father and things like that.
I agree.
Where do you think that that's coming from, or why do you think that it is attracting some people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the big things that is pushing it, honestly, is algorithm biased.
Mm-hmm.
Someone like Mark Cuban talks about this a lot, about how the algorithms will, men will watch a certain person, an individual, a show, and then it just keeps hitting them more and more with the same content, the same people. And so it creates a really narrow perspective, and you find yourself actually having pretty narrow amount of voices speaking into your life. There may be a lot of people, but they're all kind of saying the same thing, the same messaging. And I think the more we get attached to our phones, the more our lives are dictated by whatever the algorithms put in front of us. Then we really put ourselves in a position to be pretty limited in who we're listening to and the perspective of the world we get. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a huge part of that. And, the other part of that too, Anthony, is I use Joe Rogan as a great example, where when he started his podcast, he was this California liberal,
Mhm.
and now he's this conservative Texan, right?
Yeah.
All because of the people he's listened to. And you become like the people you listen to, you become like the people you hang out with. And so you can see that in real time with him. And I think you just see that a lot when people are consuming media and just whatever the algorithm puts in front of them, they kind of become, you know, like the people they listen to. And when all you're getting is you got to hit the gym, this really toxic way of thinking about it, where it's not about doing what's best for others, looking out for others, making a better world for others, um, then you kind of become that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like Joe Rogan just in the last year or two really kind of went off at an edge. I did used to listen to him more often, and I think he used to make an effort to have people on that disagreed with him or had people on that, had different opinions out in the world. And I don't know why he's kind of started to create a little bit more of an echo chamber of one side.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that started with COVID, and
Hmm.
not just for Rogan. I think a lot of it started for COVID with society at large, right? Because we were all at home, we were all on our phones. That was the only way we could be connected for a
Yeah.
lot of us. And so you just perpetuate that 4 years out now, where you continue to just get fed what the algorithms put in front of you.
Hmm. That's
Well,
interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good point.
yeah, I think it's huge. I really believe that at large as a society, we haven't really dealt with the emotional ramifications of COVID on all of our lives, because
Hmm.
it affected all of us in different ways. And I'm not even talking about politically. I'm just talking about like personally, jobs, family, social stuff. Like um, it was crazy. We made it through.
I know. Yeah. I mean, I was in New York City at the time. It was
Oh,
nuts.
really?
Yeah. It was really crazy. And I was talking to my wife recently about this. I forgot how long it was till people really started to socialize again because
Hmm.
the vaccine didn't come out until the following March, April, May. So it was almost a full year of really people not doing anything. I mean that first Christmas in 2020, most people didn't get together. You forget that it really wasn't just like a few months, but it was a really long time before people started to socialize and gather in a concerted way.
Yeah, I remember talking to a work colleague during COVID. This is maybe like a year later. And I was like, man, COVID's only been around for like a year, 18 months. I'm like, this feels like, dog years is
Yeah.
7 years for a dog, one year for us. And we need like COVID years, like post COVID is like 3 years to every 1 year. Cause that's what it felt like. It felt like so much longer ago than just 4 years ago.
I know. I just feel like life is forever defined by pre and post COVID, you know.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah,
and
it
and you
really
have
is.
and you have a good point because like definitely the rise of TikTok came from when we were all at home on our phones, and I see the algorithm just really feeding me what I wanted
Hmm.
to feed me, and you see how you can really just start to get the same information over and over again. And so I do sometimes. It's funny because then I'll try to watch other things, and like I'll watch like Ben Shapiro say something like just to
Hmm.
see what he has to say about a topic. And then I'll see that it's like, oh, you must like him, so it starts sending me
Yes.
more videos like
Yes.
that. So it's really crazy to just see like your phone will feed you more of what you consume.
Well, and I think people have to remember with the algorithms that their fundamental purpose is to keep you on the app. right? And so where it really gets you is, I give a good example of, I love Neil deGrasse, and I enjoy his show and space, and
Hmm.
he's been on Rogan, right? He's
Yeah.
been on Rogan multiple times.
Yeah.
So as someone who both consumes his content and has watched him on Rogan, then it's like, okay, so here's other voices,
Yeah.
right, on Rogan, or other voices on Ben Shapiro. Here's a guest you like that's been on all of these spaces, right? And then you watch that, and now you get all their other voices that, really are problematic. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
And so that's how you can see that, play that out over the course of years. Well, now you've probably listened to some people who don't have the best ideas out there.
Yeah, and it's a scale, right? Like I'm not here to like fully bash Rogan or Jordan Peterson as much, but then you get like I feel like Andrew Tate is when we get like this has gone way too far, and the fact that he was platformed as much as he was, it is a little scary that
Hmm.
he drew as much of attention as he did, and he as many people were interested in what he had to say as they were.
Yeah, and it's just so crazy in this digital age where, like, I can remember the early years of someone like Jake Paul, like,
Hmm.
coming up and just doing kind of like funny stuff on the internet. And that dude turns into like a guy headlining a fight with Tyson at Cowboy Stadium,
Yeah,
Netflix special. It's like,
yeah, really boring
what?
fight, but
What?
anyway.
But yeah, the internet can just like elevate these people.
Mhm.
They get a following, and next thing you know, they shape how people think.
Yeah, it's so true. So with the podcast that you launched, the Joshua Houston podcast, you're looking to, and I like the cover art too. I assume you're going for like the Lex Friedman look because like trying to show like, hey, we can have the same concept but with a very different community and a very different platform.
Yeah, and Lex is another one. I've watched some of his stuff, and do appreciate some of the guests. But yeah, I just wanted to have more voices on there,
Hmm.
because it does feel like, these podcasts, and there's reasons for it with booking agencies and things like that, and a lot of them are centered around promoting work these people are doing, but it's a lot of the same voices. And so that's the other thing, is you're just not getting a lot of different lived experiences. You're not hearing from other people who don't live in the same reality that you live in, who haven't experienced maybe the same America you've experienced, right? And getting those voices, getting those perspectives, elevating those. That's really what I want to do with the show.
That's awesome. And it sounds like the reception and the feedback was really positive from day one. Is that fair to say?
It was. I was not. I wasn't expecting it to go viral like it did. I think I ended up getting like over 30,000 people who followed me from that. Now, unfortunately, not all of them has started listening to the podcast yet, but we're working on that.
Yeah,
But
like and subscribe, everybody. Come on.
yes, but yeah, I think more than anything, it showed, uh, that there is, and I will say too, an overwhelming majority of them were men. An
Hmm.
overwhelming majority of them were men, and so I think there's a real hunger for, men to have fresh voices, have different perspectives, and I think more than anything, a hunger to both learn and just connect with genuine conversation with people.
Yeah, it's interesting that men were so connected to that message because I do feel like there's not a lot out there about what it means to be a good partner from a man's perspective. I think there's a lot of calls for female voices right now are talking about more equity in the house, and fair play is a really big topic right now as well. And then again to what we were saying earlier, like the male voices are not really just talking about like how to be more thoughtful with your and intentional
Mhm.
with your spouse. Like it's just not what they're talking about.
Yeah, or even consider things from the female perspective, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Something I think of that recently happened from our time of recording this is, speaking of, I don't know if this happened on Rogan or not, but Zuckerberg recently went on there. And I think it was on Rogan when he said that the workplace needs more male energy.
Yeah, that's a all over LinkedIn right now is that
Yes.
conversation. Yeah.
Which is like, I think someone had posted, if you look at the 100 wealthiest companies, 90 of them have male CEOs. What
Mhm.
is he talking about? That the workplace needs more male energy. And it's exactly what you're talking about there. It's like, where is this coming from? Like,
Yeah.
rather than, and it's not even, DEI is a big thing right now. It's not even the diversity for the sake of diversity. It's understanding that you are made better as a business. You're made better as a company. Your product is better. You're as a person are made better when you let other voices speak into your life and you listen to them, because now you gain perspective that you didn't have before.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't even know if Zuckerberg's like going off the deep end, or I think he's just kind of being he's pandering now because of the new, the new administration coming in. I think he's just trying to get on their good side.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's better or worse than being, being genuine. Yeah. And a big conversation I have in this podcast a lot is the value that working parents and single moms is a big one too, that they bring to a workplace,
Yeah.
because as as a working parent, and especially as a single parent, you just are so efficient with your time. And I think that it'd be nice to hear Zuckerberg talk about how he values the working parent in his company more than the need for more masculine energy, which, to your point, especially like a tech bro place like that, I'm sure there's plenty of masculine energy already.
Yeah, and I wish, again, I wish people would see, um, especially for people who listen to your show that maybe own businesses or in that space. I wish they would see that as just a good business choice, because it's going to give you a broader clientele. It's going to help you see more perspectives. Like you said, like a single working parent is going to work different. They're going to be
Yeah.
more efficient. They're going to see the world differently. They're going to have different needs. And to listen to those voices and perspective, that only strengthens your product. That only strengthens your business. It's good economy. It's good
Yeah.
business to do that. And I wish that was the conversation rather than just like pandery stuff. Like, we need more masculine energy. Like, what does that even mean? Like, in in a space so dominated by men anyways, what
Yeah.
does that even mean, Mark? And rather than, I compare it to Costco. Costco's been pushing back that they're going to keep their their DEI programs. Well, part of that is, do you guys have Costco in New Jersey?
Oh yeah.
You
Well,
do?
now I'm a
Okay.
suburban dad now, so I go to Costco.
Oh, there you go. You shop at Costco a lot,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
whenever I go to Costco's here in Texas, it's just like so diverse. It's, I mean, I'm not the minority
Hmm.
in a Costco.
Yeah.
Um, and so for them to push back on it, they know their customer. They realize the people who buy our product are diverse. It's been good business for us. It's made us a retail giant. We're
Yeah.
not going to back down on good business.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to look at it, and realize whether it's diversity in the workplace or whether, like you're mentioning, as husbands, being good husbands. It's just that concept of seeing it from someone else's perspective. I think that's something we really struggle with as a society. Back to COVID, I think COVID really reinforced not doing that.
Hmm.
And if you can do that, it really turns into a superpower, whether it's as a communicator, as a business owner, or as a husband and father. If you can see the world from someone else's perspective, you're going to be better off for it.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about your experience and thoughts being a working parent. So
Yeah.
you mentioned you have two kids, you have a day job and a podcast. So how do you find time to juggle all that?
Gosh, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? That's the question I'm asking myself. Like,
Yeah.
um, and I wouldn't even say off the top. It's something that it's a work in progress. There's no, for me, like exact formula to how that works, or I definitely haven't cracked the code. There's a lot of days I feel overwhelmed. A lot of days I feel too busy. Um, so I found, for me, it's one of those where you just got to strike trying to pursue those dreams, those passions, whether it's like a podcast or starting a business, those hobbies, those things to me, are very life-giving. And so I like to do those, but I still got to be responsible, still got to do good at work, still got the kids and the wife. So there's also been times I've just had to scale back
Hmm.
and just realize I don't have time to do everything. And so I've got to prioritize what I do have time for. And then also really reframe my mindset on it, because my personality type is one that just, I want to go, 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 do and achieve. For any of your listeners who are familiar with the Enneagram personality test, I'm an Enneagram 3, which is categorized as an achiever.
Mm.
And so it's very natural for me to want to just keep going and grinding. And I've really had to work on, okay, let me just enjoy the moment, because that's hard for me to do because I'm always thinking of the next thing and working on the next thing. And so saying, okay, no, let me pause. Let me just be present with my wife. Let me be present with my kids. Let me just enjoy where we are rather than trying to work and achieve to make things better. That's tough. That's really tough. It's hard. It's a hard mindset to get into, especially because we live in a culture, at least here in the United States, where you're expected to work a lot. You're expected to work 40 plus hours and be on the grind and be busy. I kind of like to say that if you're not on the verge of burnout, then you're perceived as lazy.
Yeah.
And so just trying to shift that mindset, and say no to things, choose the right things, and prioritize family, even when it's like, okay, I'm not going to get, this work for the podcast done. I'm going to spend time with my family. Sometimes you just got to make those decisions, and that's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah. No, I definitely hear that. Do you think about the way your kids see the way you approach your career, or the way, like, you just like how much time you give to it versus how much time you give to them?
What a great question. And I think about that a lot because I am busy. My wife's
Mm.
busy too with her work, and it's that balance, right? Of you want to provide a good life for your kids, and to do that, you have to work. You have to build a career and do those things, but you also don't want to leave them behind in the process. And
Yeah.
um, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to give your kids a good life, and working hard to do that. Like that's what good parents do. But I think there's a lot of us, and probably a lot of your listeners, who come from a background where maybe even their parents were monetarily successful and and had great careers and had great success, but they felt like they weren't there, and
Mhm.
they would have given up some successes and comforts for their parents to be more emotionally present. And so I try to remind myself of that. Like, yes, I want to give them a good life. Yes, it's fun to do trips you know, and those type of things. But they also, more than anything, they just want me to be present with
Yeah.
them. They want me to play games with them and wrestle with them, jump on the Nintendo Switch with them. Um, and so just trying to keep that perspective and that balance. It is a balance. You do got to hustle, but you also got to be present. And so I think for everyone, it's different. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do that. It's just the awareness of both of those realities, I think, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, after I became a parent, I felt it's almost like a dichotomy of, you feel like this real urge to provide and to
Mm-hmm.
offer as much as you can, but then you also feel this this urge of like nothing else matters, and just spending as much time with them as you can is also what's most important. And so
Yeah.
it is tough, it
Did
is
you
tough to find that
find
balance.
did you find when you had kids, like that urge to like provide and do well in work, did that go up with kids, or did kids kind of change in the other direction of like, okay, this is the priority now?
I think that's my challenge, that it did go up, as did the urge to prioritize them. Is It was like
Yes.
really like competing priorities that both went
Yes.
up.
Yes, exactly. Like I love how you said that it's competing priorities that both went up, and that's how it
Yeah.
felt for me, and I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of parents.
Yeah. It's like wow, I really now want to provide more than I ever have before, but I also want to now work less so I can spend more time with my kid. Right.
Yes. Yes,
It,
exactly.
it's a tough one.
It is. It is tough.
Yeah.
And we live too in societies that are very busy,
Hmm.
because you work Monday through Friday, and especially as the kids get older and they have extracurriculars, maybe you go to a religious service on the weekends as well, or you live close and you're at family events and functions, and life is just full. It's really full. It's really busy. That doesn't mean it's bad. A full life is beautiful and great. But it's also good and healthy to sometimes say no, try to pause, and have like a slow Saturday rather
Yeah,
than, all right, we're off, we're going. And it just turns into another work day. So I think that's just the balance, what works in a healthy way for each family unit of the busyness and the chaos and the fun that is family, balanced with, let's just hang out on the couch and watch a movie on a Sunday afternoon type of thing.
totally. After the holidays, all of January, we were like, no plans for a while.
Yes. I
Then
love
another
that.
thing you mentioned was our parents' generation working hard and maybe not being around as much. And I think one thing that I'm noticing about our generation is they're really worried about screwing it up. In a
Mm,
way, I don't think my parents were thinking. Not that they wanted to screw me up, but I just don't think that it was on their radar as much, And it's interesting to see that shift because I don't know about you, but like when I grew up, I know my parents they wanted to give a better life than they had, right? As
yeah.
most parents do. And I think that to them that was mostly financial and like material, right? And now
Mhm.
I think our generation is really thinking like, how do I give my kids a better psyche than I had, or like
Yeah.
a better like less traumaful experience than I
Yeah.
had, right? And we are a little bit less concerned with making sure that their material possessions are better.
Yeah. And that's such a huge conversation right now with parents, right? And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of pressure to not mess it up, not mess your kids up, and do it right. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that um, we had parents that were good parents in a lot of ways, but there's a lot higher emphasis, I think, with millennials and younger, to kind of work on yourself.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we're the first generation that normalized therapy, right?
Yeah, and it's so funny even when you like watch like old movies from the 90s, 80s, whenever they talk about therapy, it's always like a punchline thing or a taboo thing. And so
Yeah.
even us being willing to do that and work on ourselves, right? That's something that, you know, for whatever reason, older generations resist, whether it's just blatant defiance or a conditioning to resist something like that. And so I think because we spend a lot of time trying to do self improvement, we're aware of things that maybe our parents weren't aware of growing up. Like, okay, maybe working all the time and making a bunch of money but never being around isn't actually the best way forward, right? It
Yeah.
makes for a great house, a nice private school, and everything. But man, I wish dad was present, you know. And so I think even just having spaces like this more publicly to kind of talk about those things allows people to just kind of reflect and wrestle with it. Like, well, what is that balance? I do, like we said, want to provide well, want to give a good life to my kids, but I want to be there. Because the other thing I think about a lot as a dad is, and I don't know if you feel this way. Well, let me say it this way. When we had our very first kid, like the wisest thing any older person ever said to us was they said the days will be long, but the years will be short.
Mm,
And
yes.
the longer we've had kids, the more that has become so true. Where, yes, the days are long, they are tiring and exhausting, but boom, like the next thing you know, you almost have a teenager. Next
Yeah.
thing you know, they're getting older, and it's a blink. And so that's the other thing I think of is they're only going to be kids at home for a very short amount of time. Now, they'll always be our kids. We'll always
Mhm.
have, hopefully, a great relationship with them. But they're only going to be here at home for a short time. They're only going to think, as a dad, you like are literally Superman
Yeah.
for a short time. So just trying to take in and appreciate those moments as you have them. That's hard to do when you're busy and you're also in survival mode. Lots of times trying to stay above water, and then you're
Yeah.
like, oh wait, let me enjoy this as well. Let me enjoy the thing that I feel like I'm drowning in also.
Yeah. That's probably the number one piece of advice I get when I talk to people on the show about how I should approach things differently. It's just like try to be as present as you can. soak it in while you can. It's going to go by. And it's been, 18, 19 months and it's flown by, it's
It
pretty
has.
crazy.
Yeah, it has. And then when it starts turning into years, and it's just like, wow, how are you this old? When did that happen?
Right,
Especially because our phones now will show us like, the old pictures of
memories. I know.
I know, of like, hey, you remember when your kid was this little and you were that much younger? And it's like,
yeah. All right, we're going to move into the final segment called Joshua's Advice Corner. So I'm going to ask you for some advice on a few topics.
Okay.
Ready? Okay.
All right. I can't promise it'll be good advice, but it will be advice.
That's all that matters. It's your advice. Okay, well, first of all, what's your best piece of advice for working parents?
Oh, man, my best piece of advice for working parents. That is a great question. I would say constantly assess what is the most important thing, right? Sometimes that is work. Sometimes you do have to get that project in, or you do have meetings you have to be ready for. Sometimes that is family. Sometimes that's even yourself. Sometimes you need that time to yourself, that hobby. I love cigars. So I love to grab a cigar and a glass of wine. So every day can be different, but constantly just do that check of like, okay, what's the most important thing here for me? Not just to achieve, but for a healthy life. And those are going to change. Those are fluid. Those are going to fluctuate. But just check in on those often.
Yeah, I like that. What advice do you have for someone that wants to start a podcast?
Oh man, get ready. My advice is it is more work than you think it is. But the other part of that would be more than anything, just start it, right? Yeah. You are allowed to build the plane while you fly. I think a lot of us look at these other successful platforms, and you're looking at one of either two things. Either A, they've been doing it for years and they've built up an audience and a cash flow to allow it to be this great production, or B, they're a celebrity who has the money to hire a bunch of people to do it for them, right?
Yeah.
So just start it. If you have the idea, do your research on it, figure out what you need to get going, and then jump and do it. It's going to be a lot of work, but it'll be worth it, and it'll be a lot of fun.
What advice do you have for someone that is struggling, feeling like they're not being a great parent?
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
I always say that good parents lots of times feel like they're not good parents because we are often thinking about how did we respond to this? I'll give you a great example. Be very transparent with your listeners here. The other day, I got pretty frustrated with my boys over something. And I know there's a lot of parenting advice out there about not losing your temper and stuff like that, which I don't feel like is realistic. But understanding that, okay, when I didn't control my emotions well, what I now have to do is I have to display to them what that looks like to come back and acknowledge that I didn't do that. So I had to go to them. I apologized to them. I told them, look, I talked to you about controlling your emotions. I didn't do that there. I'm sorry for that. And I had to apologize to them, right? You don't have to be perfect, right? But you just have to ground yourself in the fact that I love these kids unconditionally and let that be the filter to which you parent. And when you do that, I think you're going to land on the right side more than not. And I think your kids will appreciate that. So if you don't feel like you're doing a good job as a parent, I'm right there with you. So are so many other parents.
Same.
Because the other thing is, we joke with our oldest, like everything's a first with him. Like we've never done it with anyone else. Now our second born, like we've been there, done that. We've done those ages before. And so give yourself some grace too. You're still learning each new stage as a parent. And that's the irony of it is everything is new as a parent. So give yourself some grace and welcome to the club.
Is there one resource you'd recommend related to parenting? If you had to pick one, whether it's a book or an Instagram account or a video.
Yeah, that's a great question. selfishly, I would say the podcast that my wife and I do, Give Them Glitter,
Okay,
where
great.
we,
Selfless plug.
yeah, selfless plug there. Honestly, we don't talk about like parenting advice and that. We just kind of share our story and our journey there. Um, as far as parenting resources go, it's one of the things that's tough about that is there's just so much out there. So it's hard um, to to know what is good. I would say with anything more than a like specific resource, I would say kind of listen to everything with a grain of salt because not everything is completely right or completely wrong. Like you can learn from that. And so a huge thing that inspired my wife and I to start our podcast was just conversations we were having with other parents who we were friends with and learning from them and listening to them and hearing how they handled this situation with their kid. And that was honestly the most insightful, informative thing is just doing life with other parents. And so I think truly one of the best resources is your friend group who has kids and doing it with them because you're all learning. You're all on this crazy adventure together. And so um I would say try to find more than a book or a podcast. Do listen to our podcast. More than that, yeah, find that community because that community is going to be on the day to day what sustains you and helps you. Those friends, that's where it's at. You need a village. You really do need a village.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice, like parenting, career wise, just in
Anything, yeah,
general.
whatever comes to
Oh
mind.
man,
Yeah.
best advice. Uh, wow. Let me think on that one. Um, I think, man, there's so. I'm just thinking of like all the people in my life who have given me good advice in different ways. That thing about the parenting one, the days are long, the years are short. That's one of those that has just like stuck with me in parenting. Um, and then I'll another one that has really stuck with me has to do with marriage, where um, it's a it's a term. I'm not sure exactly where the term came from, but it's says the little foxes spoil the vineyard. And basically what it's saying is like it's the little things that you don't necessarily always see. Like in a vineyard, you wouldn't necessarily see the foxes running around, right? But the next thing you know, they've, you know, ruined the crop. And so it's those little things often in a marriage that accumulate over the course of years that can really sour the relationship. And so really try to tend to the little things in your marriage and it will keep your marriage healthy.
It's a good
And
one.
that's something my wife and I have tried to do. We've not been perfect. We've had our arguments and everything and our ups and downs, but I think the reason that a decade in now, you know, we're still best friends and love each other is we have been intentional with the little things. And that gets harder, you know, with career and kids and busy lives. And so that's always a good reminder for me of like, do the little things of like, get the flowers or the gift or an extra long hug, you know, in the kitchen. Those type of things actually go a really long way in keeping that partnership healthy.
Yeah, I love that. Other than that, what advice would you give to your former self?
Oh, man, a lot. um, I think the biggest thing I would say, you know, this is a perspective I heard from someone that really stuck with me. They said if younger you could see where you are now, they would probably be jealous of you. And that's really stuck with me because, you know, being young, we had kids young, we got married young, we didn't have a lot. And so, you know, just like working and striving and hustling and all of that, now it's like, oh, wait, you're not just building for a life you want. You've actually made it. You created the life you wanted. Slow down and enjoy it, man.
Yeah.
And so that's probably what I would tell my younger self is you're going to be okay. You're going to make it and get there. Don't forget to enjoy it along the way because like we said, those moments go fast and you can always look back, but soak it in the present.
All right, last question. By the time this episode comes out, my daughter will probably be about 20 months old. So, what advice do you have for me as a father of a 20-month-old daughter?
Oh man. Gosh. Honestly, I mean, I think the fact that you are having these conversations about parenting, work, life, being busy and how to do it well, I think that says that you put a lot of intentionality into the things you do, including being a parent. And so I think one, that's a great start. I think you're off on the right track. And um, my advice to you would be more than anything, enjoy it, because 20 months is so much fun. I missed 20 months.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I know they can talk back at 20 months, but it gets different when they get older.
Yeah.
And
This has
so
been a really fun age.
it's so fun, and I don't think you realize how fun those moments are until they're older, right? And I've experienced that with both of my kids. And the other thing, and I say this to everyone, one of the things we really try to do is parent with the end in mind. And what we mean by that is they're going to spend most of their life as an adult. We know that, like, we have been adults a long
Sure.
time and navigate our adult relationships with our parents. And for a lot of us, that's a struggle, right? And so there's a lot of those times I have to remind myself of that, of like, okay, parent with the end in mind. And like, I need to make myself available for this conversation about a toy argument with his brother, because it may turn in as a teenager to a conversation about a friend
Mm.
or something heavier, and they all build on each other. And so that's not just to you, that's to anyone listening, is, realize that they're going to grow up and be adults, and you want to have a healthy adult relationship with them for the rest of their life. And
That's
they're
a
only
really
going to
good
be
one.
under your roof, actually, truly, for a short time.
Yeah.
Very important short time. Parent with the end in mind, and enjoy it.
Love it. Well, Joshua, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, anything you want to share or promote?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I've appreciated it, and appreciated listening to your podcast as well.
Thank you.
Getting to meet other parents. As far as connecting with me, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Threads. I also, my show, the Joshua Houston podcast, as well as the podcast I do with my wife around family life, Give Them Glitter. Both of those are on YouTube, so you can search both of those, and they should come up. And would love to connect with people there.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to that on the show notes. Joshua Houston, ladies and gentlemen. Joshua, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.